I know what it feels like when something shifts beneath you, not dramatically. Not all at once, but quietly. The way ice thins in late February. You don't notice until you're already standing in the wrong place. My name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old. And I've lived in the same house in Kelowna, British Columbia, for 31 years. My husband, David, built the back deck with his own hands the summer before our daughter, Claire, started kindergarten. He passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. There was no long goodbye. There was Tuesday. And then there was the rest of my life without him. I don't say this to earn your sympathy. I say it because you need to understand what I had. And what someone decided was worth taking. After David died, I was left with a house paid off, worth about $890. 000 by current Kelowna market standards, a modest investment portfolio through RBC Dominion Securities, and a defined benefit pension from my 30 years as a registered nurse at Kelowna General Hospital. I'm not wealthy in the way people imagine when they hear the word, but I am comfortable. I am stable. I built that stability the hard way. Shift by shift. Year by year. Long before David was gone, and long after. Claire is 34 now. She teaches grade 3 at an elementary school in West Kelowna. And she is, without question, the best thing that has ever happened to me. She has her father's patience and her grandmother's stubbornness. And she laughs loud enough that the neighbors have mentioned it always kindly. She started dating a man named Ryan about 2 years before any of this began. I want to be careful here. I want to be honest. When I first met him, I had no reason not to like him. He was 40 years old. Worked in commercial real estate development out of Vancouver. Drove up on weekends to see Claire. He was tall and well-dressed and spoke with the kind of easy confidence that fills a room without demanding attention. He brought wine the first time he came to dinner, a burrowing owl Merlot from down the valley, which told me he'd done his homework. He asked about my nursing career. He remembered details from one conversation to the next. Claire glowed when he was in the room. What was I supposed to do with that? What was I supposed to say? The first time he asked about the house, I thought nothing of it. We were sitting on that back deck, the one David built, and Ryan was looking out at the lake view. And he said, "This property must be worth something significant now with everything happening in the Okanagan." I said yes. Values had gone up considerably. He nodded and asked if I'd had it assessed recently. I told him I had 2 years prior. He said I should probably update that. Good advice. I thought, practical. The kind of thing a real estate professional would naturally think about. The second time, I still thought nothing of it. It was 2 months later, Thanksgiving weekend. Claire had made her father's stuffing recipe, the one with the apples and sage. And we were all a little warm from the wine. Ryan asked whether I'd ever considered doing a secondary suite to generate rental income. Good passive income, he said, especially with my lot size. I told him I hadn't thought about it seriously. He said it could add significant assessed value. He mentioned that properties in my neighborhood were being snapped up by developers for consolidation. He said it almost gently. The way you'd mention a financial opportunity to someone you cared about. The third time, I started counting. It was December, and we'd just come back from a walk along the waterfront. Ryan mentioned, unprompted, that he'd looked up the current land assessment on the BC Assessment website, my address, my property, and that I was sitting on more than I probably realized. He said it the way people say, just so you know, as though the information were a gift. I smiled and changed the subject, but that night, after he and Claire had gone back to her apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with my tea and I stayed there for a long time. Ask me once. And I assume curiosity. Ask me twice. And I note it. Ask me 3 times about my property, my assets, my financial situation, and I start to pay a very different kind of attention. I want to be precise about what changed in me. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even suspicion in the way most people imagine suspicion, that hot, uncomfortable feeling. It was more like a door opening slowly, letting in cold air. I became very quiet about what I knew. I became very watchful about what I showed. In January, Ryan asked Claire to marry him. She called me from the parking lot of the restaurant, still crying, voice high and happy. And I sat on the edge of my bed and I said all the right things. I meant some of them. I loved my daughter. I wanted her to be happy. I was also, at that same moment, logging into my RBC account to review the beneficiary designations on my investment accounts, and making a mental note to call my solicitor in the morning. My solicitor is a woman named Patricia, who has handled my affairs for 11 years. I've updated my will twice since David died. Patricia is calm and thorough and does not alarm easily. When I called her and described the pattern of questions, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Margaret, you're right to be here. Let's talk about your options." We reviewed everything. My will, my power of attorney, the title on the house. I had already named Claire as my primary beneficiary, which was appropriate. But Patricia pointed out something I hadn't fully considered, depending on how a marriage contract was structured or not structured, and depending on how certain assets were held, a spouse could have legitimate claims under British Columbia's Family Law Act in ways that might surprise me. Not automatically, not simply, but potentially. She recommended we ensure everything was clearly documented, that I understood what I was signing if I ever signed anything, and that I speak with my financial advisor to review account structures. I did all of that, quietly, without telling Claire. I want to explain why I didn't tell Claire yet. It is the part of this story that I have thought about most. She was happy. She was planning a wedding, and I had, at that point, nothing concrete, only a feeling, only a pattern of questions, only the slow cold draft from a door I wasn't sure I'd imagined opening. If I was wrong, I would have poisoned something beautiful for nothing. If I was right, I needed to know more before I said anything at all. So I watched. Ryan visited most weekends through the winter. He was attentive to Claire, genuinely affectionate from what I could see. He helped her move a bookshelf. He shoveled her walkway without being asked. He sent me a birthday card in February, handwritten, specific, mentioning a story I'd told at Christmas about my first year of nursing. I held that card for a while. I thought either this man is exactly what he seemed, or he is very, very good. In March, something changed. Claire mentioned that Ryan had asked her in passing. She said, "Just curious whether I'd ever thought about putting the house in both our names, hers and mine, for estate simplicity." He'd said, "To avoid probate." Claire had relayed this to me without any particular concern. The way you pass along a piece of practical information. I asked her what she'd said. She said she'd told him she didn't know, that it was my house, that I'd make my own decisions. Good girl. My good, practical girl. I said I'd think about it. I did not think about it. I called Patricia and told her. Patricia said, under no circumstances change the title on that property. Then, in April, I found out he'd called my doctor's office. He had called as Claire's fiancé, introducing himself, asking whether Given my age and the stress of recent years, I had been assessed for any cognitive concerns. He framed it as the question of a caring future son-in-law. The receptionist had noted the call and mentioned it to my physician, Dr. Okonkwo, who told me about it at my annual checkup. Clearly uncomfortable, she said she had disclosed nothing, that she had no concerns about my cognition whatsoever, and that she wanted me to know the call had been made. I sat in her office for a moment. After she told me, I thanked her. I kept my voice level. I drove home, parked in the garage, and sat in the car for 20 minutes. He was building something. That's what I understood. Sitting there in the dark with my hands in my lap, he wasn't just curious about my finances. He was constructing a narrative, the aging widow, the valuable property, the future question of who was fit to manage what. It was slow and it was careful, and if I hadn't been paying attention from December onward, I might not have seen the shape of it until it was much further along. I called my son-in-law, David's brother's son, James, who is a paralegal in Calgary, not for legal advice, but because I needed someone outside the situation to help me think clearly. James listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. Then he said, Margaret, this is a documented pattern. The property questions, the title suggestion, the doctor's office call. Each one individually might be nothing. Together, they tell a story. He said I should write everything down, with dates, and keep the document somewhere Ryan could never access. I did. I bought a small notebook, and I kept it in my car, in the pocket behind the driver's seat, and I wrote in it after every visit, every conversation, every small thing. I noticed Claire's wedding was planned for the last weekend of September, at a vineyard in Summerland, about 40 minutes south of Kelowna. Along the lake, she had been planning it with joy and with care, the way she does everything. She'd asked me to help with the table settings, which meant 3 Saturdays of her spreading fabric swatches across my kitchen table while I made tea, and we talked about nothing in particular, which is sometimes the best kind of talking. I had still not told her. 2 weeks before the wedding, Ryan came to the house alone. Claire was at a school event to drop off some boxes she'd asked him to bring. We sat in the kitchen, and he accepted a cup of coffee, and he was warm and pleasant. And then, with the same easy, conversational tone he always used, he mentioned that he'd been speaking to a financial planner about estate consolidation strategies for blended families. He said it might be worth the 3 of us sitting down together. He said he only wanted to make sure I was protected. I looked at him across my kitchen table, the table where I have eaten 31 years of meals, where Claire did her homework, where David and I read the paper on Sunday mornings, and I said, "That's very thoughtful. Let me know when you've set something up." He smiled. He finished his coffee. He left. I picked up my phone and called Claire. I told her everything. Not quickly. Not in a rush, carefully. With the notebook open in front of me, going through the dates and the details in order. I told her about the property questions, the title suggestion, Dr. Okonkwo's call, James's assessment, the financial planner conversation. I told her I had been watching since December, and I had not wanted to say anything until I was sure. The line was very quiet when I finished. Then my daughter said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." She had found something 3 weeks earlier and had not known how to bring it to me. Ryan had left his laptop open on her kitchen counter while he was in the shower, and she had glanced at it, not snooping, just glancing, and she had seen a document open, a spreadsheet, with columns. Her name, my name, the address of my house, estimated current valuation, the RBC account she knew I had, the pension monthly amount she'd once overheard me mention, and a column she didn't understand at the time, labeled simply timeline. She had closed the laptop and said nothing. She had told herself there was an explanation. She had been trying to believe there was an explanation for 3 weeks. We were both quiet on the phone for a moment. Then I said, "All right, here's what we're going to do." Claire and I met with Patricia 2 days later. We brought what we had: my notebook, Claire's account of the spreadsheet, the documented call to the doctor. Patricia was measured but direct. She said that individually, these pieces would be difficult to act on legally, but that the pattern was clear enough that we had options. She recommended we consult with the RCMP non-emergency line to document the situation, which we did not, to file charges, which couldn't be supported yet, but to create a formal record with a date stamp. She also strongly recommended that Claire speak with a family lawyer before the wedding, given that BC's Family Law Act could create property rights from the date of marriage. Claire made that call the same afternoon. The lawyer, a woman in Kelowna who specializes in family law, was direct with Claire. She said that if Claire married Ryan without a marriage agreement in place, certain property protections that currently existed could become complicated. Depending on how things were structured over time, she was careful to explain the law accurately, not to frighten her, but to make sure she understood what she was agreeing to. Claire came home to my house that evening. We sat on the back deck, the one David built, and we drank tea and watched the light go off the lake. She asked me, "Do you think he loves me?" And I said, honestly, that I didn't know. I said that I thought some people could feel something real while still being willing to take something they had no right to. I said that the two things were not necessarily impossible together, but that she deserved someone for whom that question didn't even come up. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm going to confront him." Before the wedding, privately. She did. I wasn't in the room. She told me afterward that she had been calm, her father's calmness, and that she had shown him a printed copy of the spreadsheet she'd photographed on her phone, and that she had asked him to explain it. She said he had been very still for a moment, and then he had said it was nothing. Research. He liked to be thorough. She said she had asked him about the doctor's call. He had said he was concerned about me. She had asked him about the title suggestion. He had said it was just an idea. She had asked him, finally, why there was a column called Timeline. He had no answer for that. Claire called off the engagement the night before the wedding. She called the vineyard, the caterer, the guests. She was methodical and dry-eyed through all of it, though she let herself cry later. In my kitchen. For a long time. I sat with her, and I held her hand, and I didn't say anything about being glad or being right, because none of that mattered in that moment. What mattered was that she was safe, and that she had chosen herself. I should tell you this, because I think about it sometimes. I later learned, through a conversation with a mutual acquaintance, that Ryan had grown up in a difficult financial situation. His parents had lost their home when he was a teenager, a mortgage they couldn't carry through a job loss. He'd put himself through school, built his career carefully. I don't know how much of what he did was shaped by that fear and how much was simply who he chose to be. I'm 67 years old, and I've learned that history can explain things without excusing them. The call to my doctor was not curiosity. The spreadsheet was not research. A 17-year-old watching his family lose everything does not give a 42-year-old the right to take what belongs to someone else. I updated my will again in October. Patricia recommended a few additional steps around the power of attorney documentation, which I completed. My house remains in my name. My accounts remain as they were. I called Dr. Okonkwo's office every spring to confirm they have a note that I do not authorize third parties to make inquiries about my health without my written consent. Claire is doing well. She went back to her classroom in October and threw herself into it. The way she always does. She has gone on a few dates this past year carefully. Thoughtfully. The way you learn to do after something like this. She came for dinner 2 Sundays ago and helped me plant the spring bulbs along the front walk. And we talked about nothing in particular. Which is sometimes the best kind of talking. I want to say one more thing before I'm done. There is a particular kind of targeting that happens to older women. Especially widows. It is not random. It relies on the assumption that we are lonely. That we are grateful for attention. That we have assets and diminished vigilance. It is patient and it is deliberate, and it often goes unnoticed until it is very far along. I am telling you this because I was lucky that I noticed early. Lucky that I had Patricia. Lucky that Claire found that spreadsheet and trusted herself enough to hold on to what she saw. Many women are not so lucky. If someone in your life asks about your property 3 times, I want you to count. I want you to pay attention. I want you to call your solicitor and review your documents before you need to cash an estate. Not because you should live in suspicion of everyone who cares for you, but because care that is real does not need to know how much your house is worth. David built that deck the summer before Claire started kindergarten. It took him 3 weekends. He made me inspect every joist before he laid the boards. And he was proud of that. Quietly proud. The way he was proud of most things. The deck is 30 years old and it still doesn't creak. That is what it looks like when someone builds something for you rather than around you. I know the difference now. I knew it then. 2. I just had to trust that I knew it.